Hey there, it's Cass. Welcome back to Tavern Talk, where I regale the many crazy stories from my D&D campaigns. As most of you know, I've been playing D&D with a dedicated group of friends for about 3 years now. This episode is a special one because it was recently our party rogue's birthday. Happy birthday, Nikki! And her character created one of the coolest moments I think we have ever had in our D&D campaign. So today I want to tell you the story of Usi Emara and the beheading of Oghaim the Ravager. To tell this story, first we must travel to the stone-walled city of Ustagar, standing tall in the vast fields of the Thunder Plains in the world of Teruna. The city's walls rise high above the many homes and shops within. Ustagar is mostly known for its farming exports and food, many of which are easily grown out in the plains thanks to the warm and hospitable climate, as well as the expansive library that sits at its center, and the Adventurers Guild resting just outside the main walls. Although not a sprawling dominion with great power such as the nearby capital city of Albane, Ustagar still held important trade routes and bustled with life because of it. Although humans were the main population of Ustagar, our focus is on an exception to the rule. Living in a small, humble home inside of Ustagar, and often found causing mischief in the streets, is a half-orc with pale, slate-blue skin and a love of heroes. Usi Emara, called Usi by anyone who didn't want a swift kick in the knees, grew up on the streets of Ustagar, living alone with her human mother Anna while they struggled to make ends meet. Anna was poor, but loved her daughter more dearly than anything else. While they did not have much, Anna would often bring home books from the library where she worked, reading to her child and telling her the many stories of legendary heroes that once walked the world during the Great War from 250 years prior. Usi loved the stories of heroes, hearing tales of great battles and triumph over evil, particularly growing fond of the tale of the Chosen One, Wolf Raider, who was said to have been selected by the very gods to overcome evil and put a stop to the war. As Usi grew older, she longed for her own opportunity to prove herself a hero, although she had never wandered outside of her home city before. You see, the Thunder Plains namesake came not from the weather of the area, but from the deafening sound that would often ring through the hills, the thundering roar of hooves. Thousands of orcs called the plains their home, and they would ride through the plains on the backs of droves of giant boars, forming nomadic clans who lived off the land and had a rich culture of their own. Ustagar's walls rose high, protecting the people from what they saw as violent clans of orcs. Although there was once peace between the orcs and the humans of Ustagar, the rapidly growing farmland had begun to encroach on the orcs' land. While many orcs were initially willing to discuss with the humans peacefully about dividing the land and making the farmland still livable for their clans, a new leader had recently stepped forward. Oghaim, the Ravager, was known for one thing: brute force. He frowned upon all things magical and peaceful, believing them to be the tools of weaklings, and decided that Ustagar would be taken by force. Oghaim was Usi's father. Usi despised the man responsible for so much needless bloodshed, and also for how he had seemingly abandoned both Usi and her mother to fend for themselves after she had been born. She knew very little of her orcish heritage growing up, although the people of the city of Ustagar would not let her forget it. Usi was no stranger to the prejudice of others. When she became an adult, Usi was finally given an opportunity to set out on her own, as rumors of falling stars granting magical power spread through the land. A star had fallen on the mountain just outside of the frozen city of Frostfall to the north, and she could use this opportunity to get away from her father and the growing conflict of her hometown. It is here where Usi met the party she would travel with, and without knowing it, become a part of a legend herself. The party traveled for a time together, heading from the frigid mountains of Frostfall, then all the way south again, delving deep into the Mabon Forest and the mysterious Feywilds, where they uncovered a sinister plot to ravage all of the plains. But that story is for another day. The party left the Feywilds with gifts from the Fey King Oberon, who had set them out on a mission to uncover this plot. The gift Usi received was an especially important one: a magical living blade by the name of Caliburn. Caliburn is an odd entity, often talking loudly and for hours at a time about the wild stories of heroism he had previously carried out when wielded by heroes. Usi found him annoying more than anything when they first met, although he was certainly useful in combat despite his ever-willingness to boast about himself. As the party departed from the Feywilds, they decided to stop by Ustagar before heading east into the Triet Desert, hoping to pick up some supplies for their travels along the way. But as the city appeared on the horizon, their hearts sank, and they could smell the pungent scent of smoke and blood. The city of Ustagar was burning, one of the outer walls crumbling and leaving it a giant hole, through which a massive raiding party of orcs had flooded. Usi, fearful for her family, sprinted with the party through the city, working their way through the rubble and searching the streets for her mother. When they reached her home, they found it half caved in on itself, pieces of burnt roofing and beams falling inwards. Anna was nowhere to be found. The party split up, some of them going to discuss with the guards what their plans were, and if they knew any helpful information, and others continuing to comb the streets for Usi's mother. They discovered that her mother had been captured during the raid, and Usi's heart broke. Despite the guards' prejudice against Usi for being a half-orc, the party decided they should temporarily ally themselves with the guard, who had captured one of the orc raiders, one who seemed to be younger and smaller than the rest. Usi's gift for speaking Orcish was useful to the captain, and they allowed her to interrogate him because of it. She was surprised to find that this orc was her own age. Although he was bigger than she was, he was still far too small to actually be a full-blooded orc like the captain had described. While questioning him, she learned something that shocked her to her core. The boy's name was Izu, and he was also a son of Oghaim. Usi could not understand. How come her mother had never mentioned she had a brother? Usi and he began to talk more openly. It turned out Izu had never known of Usi's existence either, and had never met their mother, having lived exclusively in the orc tribes his entire life. He hadn't even actually fought in the raid, as he had no skill with a blade or with clubs. His father simply forced him to go, hoping the weakest link would be lost in the fight. He hadn't even fought back when the guards took him in. The party began to notice something about him too. Although he said he had been captured because he was physically weak, there were recent bruises all over his body, as if he had been mistreated, and not from the battle itself. It was quickly exposed that the guard captain had been resorting to more violent methods of interrogation. Izu himself did not harbor any ill will towards Ustagar despite how the captain had portrayed him, and although he did think lowly of the humans, it was only because they were taking his people's land. He explained that many of his people only followed Oghaim out of fear, and most of them just wanted to live at peace in the Thunder Plains, only growing angered because of the continual ignorance of their traditions by the humans. The party decided to help the young boy escape from the prison, realizing that the guards would never see him as more than a tool to be used. It became evident that the humans were more in the wrong in this situation than the orcs, who were only trying to defend the land they already owned. After some questionable escape tactics and quick thinking by the party's paladin, they rushed back to an abandoned hideout together that used to belong to a thieves' guild in Ustagar, where they could plan. They needed a way to remove Oghaim from power without upsetting the rest of the orc clans, so the violence could stop. Izu began to teach Usi of their orcish traditions, and they came up with a dangerous idea. The clans placed a lot of importance on family, strength, and wisdom. In previous generations, there had always been two heads of a clan: the clan chief, who acted as a physical embodiment of the clan, and the clan elder, who acted as a spiritual link to the clan. Before Oghaim rose to power, his sister had been chief, and sat alongside Gorza, Oghaim's own mother, who was clan elder. Oghaim did not have the tact or wisdom of his sister, but knew he could easily overpower her in a fight. He spread dissent through some of the more radical members of the clan, gaining support from them, and turning those who were already distressed at losing their lands into rage. He used the anger of the clans to rise to power, eventually killing his own sister in single combat to take her place as chief, and the first thing he did once he was remove Gorza from her seat as elder, claiming that reliance on magic and spirits was what was holding them back from reclaiming their land in the first place. Gorza was old, and had no choice but to step down, unable to stand against her son. Since then, magic was practically outlawed within the clan, which is why Izu has always been seen as weak. Although he had no physical skills, he had very similar talents to his grandmother, who was born with great magic, although he was never allowed to use it. The two siblings decided that orc tradition was the best way to settle this. Both of them, being children of Oghaim, could claim the title of clan chief if they defeated him in combat. On the one hand, Usi had no desire to become chieftain, but she did see the spark in her brother's eyes and a love for his clan, and defeating Oghaim would help her get her mother back. She knew he would also make a fine leader and restore the previous traditions of the clan. That night, they slept restlessly, knowing that in the morning they would be fighting for their lives and the lives of their family. The party was nervous as they watched from afar the next morning, the united siblings heading into the orc camp outside Ustagar. It had been decided that just in case something went wrong, some of their friends would sneak in during the fight and try to find Anna in the commotion to help her get out just in case. The once hero Wolf sought her out, and was surprised when he found her with the old elder Gorza, who had been sneaking into Anna's prison and tending to her wounds. They spoke briefly, and Gorza was kind to Wolf, explaining how she had been trying to undo what damage she could from behind the scenes, and how she always appreciated Anna before the conflict began, as she herself knew Orcish history because of her job in Ustagar's library, and was trying to help arrange peace talks to teach the humans to be more understanding before Oghaim took over. Back in the center of camp, Usi and Izu made their claim against Oghaim. He laughed at them, his voice low and hoarse. He accepted their challenge, throwing his enormous sword down in front of them, piercing the ground. "Prepare yourselves to die. There is no place among the mighty for half-breeds." The orcs around them began to form a circle as the remaining party members looked on, unsure if they should jump in to help. They stood back and watched, the party's barbarian's knuckles growing white as he restrained himself from trying to help his friend. He knew that in order for this to matter, they had to do it on their own. The fight was long and bloody. Izu's wild magic proved to be helpful at first, allowing Usi to fly around the battlefield, taking shots at her father from above with her bow. But it all came crashing down when Izu felt his magic surge within him unexpectedly, a fireball forming in his hands and exploding as Oghaim went in to attack him. Usi landed and rushed to her brother's side, finding him unconscious in the aftermath of the spell. She turned to her father, drawing Caliburn, who was buzzing with excitement. They fought hard, leaving no room for hesitation as Oghaim flew into a rage, laughing at his daughter's dagger. He struck forward twice with his sword, dealing a blow that would leave any human or orc unconscious. Usi felt her vision began to fade, nearly falling backwards onto her brother, but she could feel something inside her, something only a half-orc could have. Willing herself forward for only a moment, she snapped herself up before she could fall, hanging on by only a string and choosing to endure. She saw her father's twisted smile, and rage filled her. Jumping forward, she pulled out her bag of holding in one hand and flung it over his head, pulling it tight. Swinging Caliburn over her head and letting out a cry of determination, she stabbed into the bag, causing everything within it to be rended forth and thrown into the astral plane. Oghaim's headless body slumped forward, falling to the ground, his head lost to another plane of existence, and the battlefield fell quiet. The single stomp of a foot was heard, followed by 2, then 5, then 10, and then 100, as the orcs began to stomp their feet and cheer. Usi ran to her brother, the party rushing forward to help and heal them both. Oghaim, the scourge of Ustagar, the Ravager, was defeated. Usi and Izu rose together, clasping each other's hands, and worked to start reforming the relationship between the humans and the orcs. It was here that Usi was given her first title, the Champion of the Thunder Plains, and the first time she could truly be called a hero. I hope you all enjoyed today's story. It was one of my favorite moments from the campaign. Usi's player Nikki came up with the idea of using the bag of holding like that on the fly, and it was too cool for me not to just let happen. I knew Nikki had always wanted to do fun things with the bag of holding, and she had mentioned that things like that had been possible to me, but I had never expected it to happen at such a pivotal moment in the campaign, let alone having Usi go down to 0 HP just for her half-orc racial ability to trigger and bring her back to 1, just so she could do it. Our party went absolutely insane when it happened. Thank you, Nikki, so much for making Usi, and I hope you know you are one of my very best friends and I care about you very much. And for everyone else, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.